Welcome back to another SIBO myth-busting extravaganza with yours truly, Dr. DiNezza. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Cedars Sinai Low Fermentation Diet. So this is the SIBO diet that is mostly promoted by Mark Pimentel and his gang out of Cedars Sinai. And while I have big problems with all SIBO diets, to be honest, and a recurring shtick on this channel and on the IBS Freedom podcast is that SIBO diets are either unnecessary, they might be causing more harm than good, or at the bare minimum, they're not working in the way we have been told, meaning they probably don't starve SIBO as much as we think they do. This is one diet that I think is particularly problematic for a couple of reasons. So let's go ahead and we're going to make me a head bubble. And we're going to talk about this bit by bit. Now, first though, before I get into the actual criticism, I want to point out something and really give credit where credit is due. They make such a great effort to educate the patient and give you information before you get to the dietary recommendations. Look at this sucker. We have to scroll through 2.5 pages of information and backstory and educational content before we even get into the conversation of what to eat. This is in stark contrast with what oftentimes happens. Usually people will go to the GI doctor or maybe a functional medicine doctor, and what happens? You're given a handout with yes and no foods, green light, red light, yellow light kind of a stuff, and you're told you have to follow this diet very strictly or the SIBO is going to win somehow. And you're just sent off into the wild blue yonder with your now borderline impossible to follow diet. Meanwhile, there's no backstory, there's no context, there's not a lot of education, perhaps. And some people are just told to Google the diet. That's even worse. Like, go Google low FODMAP. So the fact that they have some educational material built in right into this handout, I think is really nice. The only other SIBO diet that I know that does that from the material I have seen is the biphasic diet. She really tries to put some educational content in her diet as well, Neurology Kobe. But anyway, let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of this diet, food pun intended, by the way. So here we have a little chart, and kind of the deal with this diet is the idea that we want to emphasize foods that are easy for humans to digest, meaning you suck up all that food and you absorb it before it gets to the bacteria so that they don't have the opportunity to eat it, versus their stuff. So kind of like the spectrum, we've got things that are easy for humans to digest versus foods that are impossible for humans to digest. And you can kind of think of it as a like A+ to F- grading system, and then there's a gradient in between where in this case lactose and fructose are kind of iffy, maybe they're like a B or a C. And the idea here is that we're trying to emphasize more of these A+ foods and we're eliminating all the F- foods and we're eating these like B or C foods in extreme moderation, lest we feed the bacteria and they ferment. So as we go down, we get into a little bit more structure here and they give you more rules. Now, again, I will say there are 2 other really great things about this handout and about this diet in particular that I think other SIBO diets don't tend to do as well. First of all, this right here, try to be normal. This is not meant to ruin your social life. Eat out, go out. Restaurants are okay. Like that whole statement is gold. Because very frequently when people are handed lists of yes and no foods and they're told that this is war, you have to starve the SIBO, etc., it can lead to a lot of disordered eating and a lot of food fear. So the fact that they tell you, hey, this is not designed to ruin your social life, go out, eat, be as normal as you can. The fact that they say that at all is huge and commendable, and I give them a lot of credit for it. Similarly, I'm glad that they mentioned meal structure and eating discrete meals and not snacking as much. By this point, we probably all know that snacking and eating frequently inhibits the migrating motor complex, a type of motility that is associated with SIBO because it's the cleansing wave of the bowel. It clears out the bacteria in your small bowel. So again, the fact that they talk about meal timing and the snacking versus not snacking thing, so good, so good. Absolutely kudos to them. However, where we start to get into some of the problems is when we get into these discrete categories. So for example, we start out and you could see no gums or anything with sugar alcohols. Absolutely. Avoid non-absorbed sugars like Splenda. Cool. I can get behind that. Avoid dairy products like non-lactate milk, cheese, and yogurt. Yeah, okay. They do say somewhere on here that you can do lactate version, so just lactose removed, because again, lactose is in that middle column. Again, don't drive yourself crazy looking at labels. I super love that they put in that statement. But then we get into two statements on here that I have a really big problem with. First off, they said, avoid non-digestible carbohydrates. Well, they don't really explicitly say that here. They elaborate slightly in the next page. But if you Google non-digestible carbohydrates, you're going to basically pull up FODMAPs. So are they telling you to avoid FODMAPs here and avoid all like prebiotics here? It's not perfectly clear, but here's what I have an issue with. They say this includes columns 2 and 3 above. So, okay, so like the polyols in FODMAPs. However, regular sugar is no problem. You could eat cake, cookies, etc. made with this. Okay, I don't know. Again, for the sake of disordered eating and food fear and normalcy, I think it's a good thing that they threw that in there, that like you don't have to fear cakes and cookies and sweets. But also, I don't know if I would be encouraging people to eat a lot of simple sugar. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So this bit of you can have cake and cookies, I have a big problem with. Also this bit, no yogurt. Yogurt contains some lactose and also bacteria, and you have a hard time getting rid of bacteria, and that could cause more trouble. This is very common in the SIBO community, that people will have poor reactions to probiotics. But again, it's not for the reason we think it is. It's not necessarily that you ingest bacteria and then you're adding bacteria on top of bacteria and you're getting more stagnation and more SIBO. That has never once been proven to be true. Rather, I have proposed in a previous video that maybe it's more of an immunologic thing, or maybe we're just taught to fear probiotics so much that people get it in their head before they even take the probiotics and then it backfires on them. But the idea that the bacteria is going to build up and cause more SIBO and build more overgrowth is just something that is not at all proven in the literature. But Pimentel and his group will say it from now until the cows come home, and I don't understand why. For somebody who seems very well versed in the research, he talks about something pretty frequently that is just not true. So that I think is also iffy. Now getting into part 2 of the carbohydrate conversation. So again, simple, easy to digest carbohydrates are best. So again, think of that A to F grading system. Rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes are best. Okay. Bread should be white bread. Avoid anything with even a morsel of fiber in it. And for cereal, same thing. For cereal, Rice Krispies. Oh my goodness. And pasta's fine. So again, kind of going back up to where we had that little chart. So what they're talking about is easy to digest, quote unquote, carbs. So carbohydrates that immediately turn into sugar. So white bread, white pasta, white rice, potatoes, things that will spike your blood sugar like crazy are perfectly fine and healthy. And also, these are the things that if you don't absorb them, if you eat a bunch of table sugar and white potatoes and white rice, if there is some left over that you don't digest, guess who you're feeding? Candida. In my mind, this is like a blood sugar ruining, candida growing nightmare diet. And there's even a little bit more to it than that. Hold on, let me show you the rest of why I say that. They make mention of gluten. Okay, they say this is just plain old false as well. They say a gluten-free diet is a low carbohydrate diet. No, it's not. Not at all. Not even remotely close. Actually, the opposite has been repeatedly shown, is that people end up eating more carbs, particularly more simple carbohydrates when they go gluten-free, because you're swapping out a carbohydrate source that has some complexity and some prebiotic component to it, being wheat, flour. You're swapping that out for something like white rice or millet flour or whatever, insert your favorite gluten-free flour, but we're swapping it out with a lot of rice flour, and that is very simple carbohydrate. And it's just metabolized as simple sugars. So gluten-free diets not only are not low carb, but they tend to be higher glycemic index than their gluten-containing counterpart. Even if you're like swapping gluten bread for gluten-free bread, and you're swapping out gluten-free Pop-Tarts or gluten Pop-Tarts for gluten-free Pop-Tarts, even if you're keeping that relatively stable, you get more simple carbohydrates and either the same or more carbohydrates going gluten-free typically. Now, if you did a variation of gluten-free where say you did like a Whole30, then yes, if that's your version of going gluten-free, then yes, it is going to be low carb. Or if you look at celiacs and people going gluten-free prior to about 2010, then that would also be lower carb because there just weren't many gluten-free processed foods available. So you were kind of just left with produce at that point, right? So it's utterly incorrect now. It might just be outdated. Maybe they made this handout in like 2005 when going gluten-free was an entirely different ball of wax. But currently, as of 2023, this is a false statement. And that is just, that is not based off of current research. Now, here's another one that I want to draw your attention to, the conversation of fiber. Again, they make a point of saying fiber is just indigestible long chains of sugar. They throw in that word, indigestible, like it's intrinsically bad. And again, here they just say, don't go out of your way to eat fiber, eat instead of whole grain bread, get the white bread, etc. Watch out for anything with added fiber. And they say, if you want hot breakfast for cereal, skip the oatmeal, go for cream of wheat. So again, it's the same recommendation. You're avoiding any complex carbohydrates and you're avoiding any fiber in lieu of eating simple carbohydrates and simple sugars, which again are going to wreck your blood sugar, maybe make you gain a bunch of weight, and also probably feed candida for a lot of us at least. So moving on. The protein conversation, I don't have too much of an issue with. I will just point out one false statement here. And that is that they tell you to beware of butter, and they say butter contains lactose. Not really. I mean, technically, yes, right? If you were to analyze it, yes, there is a very minuscule amount of lactose in butter. So technically speaking, that is a true statement. But in the grand scheme of what they're trying to accomplish here, no. Butter is virtually devoid of lactose. It's one of the consistently lowest lactose dairy products. So no, that's not exactly true. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Okay, they tell you to drink plenty of water, minimize soda. That I can get behind. My last problem with this particular diet here, or one of the last ones, is the conversation about fruits and vegetables. So they say no beans and legumes, because again, they contain sugar-like substances, aka prebiotics, aka FODMAPs, and humans can't digest, but the bacteria can. All right, so that's kind of in line with the no prebiotic, no FODMAP kind of shtick. Avoid cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, etc. If you have salad, make it a side salad. So again, avoiding fiber and avoiding high FODMAP foods for the most part. This one is my favorite on the whole handout. No hummus. Hummus is chickpea puree. This is the worst for SIBO. I don't know who says this. I have actually found the opposite, that a lot of people with IBS and SIBO can tolerate chickpeas and hummus perfectly fine, even when they cannot tolerate other FODMAPs. So I don't know where they got this idea. I have not seen that clinically, and I do this for a living. Amy and I have talked about this. Amy is a dietitian and she has not seen this clinically. And actually there's some research that galacto-oligosaccharide, or GOS, G-O-S, which is the primary type of FODMAP found in chickpeas, can actually help treat irritable bowel syndrome. So I think this is just incorrect. They say, you could eat anything that grows under the ground. Great. You could eat anything that grows off of a plant. Great. Mushrooms are good. If you want a salad, tomato, cucumber, and onion salad, So again, they're not intrinsically worried about the FODMAPs, clearly, because they say you could eat onion and garlic and some of the foods that would normally be high FODMAP, like beets right here. But again, this idea of like no fiber, no prebiotics. Meh. I don't think that's correct. And then here, this is also just false. Apples, pears, and bananas are constipating and slow the gut. You could eat these, but at a minimum. Says who? There's no research saying this. Actually, the opposite. Pears and prunes contain sorbitol, which is a polyol. So what they could have done, they could have just X'd out this and they could have said pears and bananas contain polyols, which are similar to the sugar alcohols, therefore don't eat them. I would have been behind them, and that would have made logical sense if they had said that. Saying they are constipating is not true even in the slightest. Pears in particular, pears and prunes can help reduce constipation because the sorbitol in those fruits or their juices draws some water into the bowel and helps soften the stools. When children are constipated, one of the two go-tos that you hear about is pear juice or prune juice for a reason. It's because of the sorbitol. It's because they are non-constipating. They are anti-constipating, so I don't know where they get this. And funny enough, just a nod to my old roommate. I had a roommate once who used to swear by bananas, and she said, no matter what pooping problem you have, bananas are the solution. If you're not pooping enough, eat some bananas. You will poop more. If you're pooping too much, eat some bananas. It'll bind you up and then you'll poop less. And I don't know. I don't know if I've experimented with it a ton, but just a little shout out to Maggie, my old roommate, who thought that bananas were like the pooping cure beyond all cures. So according to Maggie, at least, they are certainly not intrinsically constipating. So I think that whole bit is just utterly false. Then let's go into a couple more points real quick, and then we've reached the end of this handout and we're going to wrap it up here. So the probiotic conversation. Yes, probiotics are very complicated. I agree with that. Yes, it would be another 7-pager all by itself. The idea of, that all bacteria produce gas, not necessarily true. The same is true for the bacteria in probiotic products. Again, not necessarily true. We have the occasional patient say they feel better with probiotics, but for the most part, people with SIBO either get worse or stay the same. Again, what's peculiar is for somebody who's so well-read and so well-researched, this is really shocking to me that they keep hammering this home, because when you read the literature on this topic, it is resoundingly positive and says, amongst many different studies, that probiotics can help eradicate SIBO. And we also have equally good evidence that suggests that probiotics alleviate symptoms of IBS, like bloating and indigestion and constipation and diarrhea and abdominal pain. And those are not coincidentally the same symptoms that people with SIBO have. So this, I don't know why they keep hammering this home, and they're like probiotic deniers over there at Cedars Sinai. But again, the overwhelming amount of evidence that we have says that probiotics are actually very, very good for both IBS and SIBO. So take this with a very large grain of salt. But that being said, I just want to share again, cheats. Go ahead and cheat on rare occasion. We don't want to make you miserable. Here are some cheat ideas. I love that they emphasize living your life, not being miserable. This diet is not supposed to ruin your social life. Go ahead and cheat sometimes. It's not the end of the world. I think as far as a disordered eating, food fear kind of conversation goes, this is probably the best SIBO diet in that regard. But as far as the blood sugar issues and candida growing conversation, this is easily the worst SIBO diet out there. So let me go ahead and take myself off head bubble mode. So bring it home. Depending how you grade this diet, it's either amazing or horrible, right? So like I said, as far as the food fear, disordered eating, orthorexic, like obsessing about food, food is taking over your life, it's consuming you. I think that the worst are going to be the Allicin-Seebecker hybrid diet and the biphasic diet. Middle of the road is going to be standard low FODMAP. And then the Cedars Sinai diet is probably the best as far as like disordered eating, food fear, that sort of stuff goes. So in that regard, this gets an A+. However, in the sense of how bad this diet would be for your blood sugar and how bad it's going to be for growing a crop of candida, this is by far the worst diet, and this is going to get an F- in that department. So it really depends how you're looking at this diet. These are the primary reasons why I don't use it and I don't recommend it, is because I think it's going to be brutal on your blood sugar and it's going to grow you a nice crop of candida. And then guess what? Rifaximin, Mark Pimentel's favorite drug, isn't going to do jack squat for candida. You might eradicate the SIBO, but if you grow candida in its place and you give yourself SIFO, then what the heck was the point of it all, right? So take this with a large grain of salt. Again, food pun, totally intended. I don't personally recommend this diet. That being said, I'm very curious if you have tried this diet, particularly if you have tried this diet as well as some other low FODMAP or SIBO diets. I would be curious if any of you can compare and contrast the different diets, if you have tried this diet as well as some of the other SIBO diets. All right, so in summary, this diet is so peculiar because you could either give it an A+ or an F-, depending what you're looking at. So like I just said, as far as the disordered eating, orthorexia, food fear, this diet is consuming every moment of my life and every aspect of my well-being, and I'm obsessed with it, and it's driving me crazy. As far as that kind of stuff goes, this is the best. I think that the worst in that regard, the worst for food fear and disordered eating and orthorexic kind of stuff, is going to be either Alison Seebecker's hybrid diet or the biphasic diet. Those are really, really, really bad for promoting disordered eating and food fear. Middle of the road is probably standard run-of-the-mill low FODMAP, particularly if you do it with a dietitian or somebody who knows what they're doing. And then the best as far as like not inducing food fear and disordered eating is probably this diet, honestly. I really appreciate that they make a point of saying, go ahead and cheat. This isn't meant to ruin your life. I think that it's really nice that they have that built into this. However, so that's one grading rubric, right? And in that case, A+. However, this is by far the worst diet if you care at all about your blood sugar and if you care at all about candida. You could eradicate the SIBO for all we know, but it doesn't mean much of anything if you then replace the SIBO with SIFO and you just grow yourself a big old crop of candida in its place. And rifaximin, Dr. Pimentel's favorite fave drug, isn't going to do jack shit for a crop of candida in your small bowel. So then what do? You're kind of left scratching your head at that point. So I don't recommend this diet for that reason. I'm very concerned about blood sugar and making sure that I don't do things that are worse for people's blood sugar. And I'm very concerned with making sure that I don't encourage people to grow candida in the process of their treatment. So for those reasons, I don't recommend the Cedars Sinai low fermentation diet that we just discussed. But again, as far as like some of the other SIBO diets are concerned, I do really appreciate that they are careful about the food fear thing and not telling their patients that this diet is the end all be all and it's meant to just consume every moment of their life. So in that regard, I've got to give credit where credit is due, but otherwise, I don't really recommend this diet. But heck, honestly, I don't really recommend SIBO diets at all. Again, this is a recurring theme in my work here and on the IBS Freedom podcast. I think that they are either not necessary or they might be harmful if done, particularly in the long term, more than a couple months. And they're not starving the SIBO nearly as much as we think they are. So that being said, registration for FODMAP Freedom, my group coaching program, closes tomorrow at midnight Eastern Standard Time. If you have any inkling in your bones whatsoever that you might want to join, go ahead and check it out. I'll try to remember to put the link in the first comment so you can check that out. Again, registration closes Friday, March 3rd at midnight Eastern Standard Time. If you missed this enrollment, no worries. You can join us in August, but I only open it twice a year. So if you're thinking you want to join sooner rather than later, check it out now. Again, like you can learn about it and you could either join later, you can not join at all, but go ahead and check that out. I'll put the link down below and in the description box down below. As always, thank you for tuning in and I will see you in the next video. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.